The reason you don't get clients is your investments suck.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me, as usual, the man, the myth, the legend, Micah Shalansky. Micah, how are you, my friend?
Jarvis, I'm doing fantastic, bud. Just another day in paradise. Excited to kind of jam on some things because we got some exciting things coming up. And man, seen some great things with our advisors and through advisor training and that extra program that we're doing for our Backstage Pass and Invictus members. And it's just been fantastic. So tons of fun.
Yeah, and here we are down in Las Vegas. We've got our Invictus Mastermind is this week. The RTS Tax Summit is this week, so really excited for that. Obviously, it's too late for you to join us in person, but you can.
Unless you're already here.
I suppose you could fly if you're already here. You could certainly fly down last minute, give somebody a call. You can also join that virtually. The RTS Tax Summit is also virtually aired. But something we want to talk about today, Micah, that we haven't talked about a lot on this podcast, and intentionally so because we don't talk about a lot in general, is investments. Now, this may seem strange because we run investments. We have AUM. We charge on assets under management, Micah, right? Which is something that's brought up from time to time. But it's probably the least frequently discussed topics inside our office with clients, with prospects on the podcast everywhere.
Sure. And I'll just say it probably wasn't always the least most talked about topic that was out there. There was probably a time that I know in my office, probably Jarvis, I'm just guessing in yours, we talked about it way too much. And in fact, we brought on an advisor to our team this year, which was fantastic. And one of the things in our re-education program and our training that we're doing with him, he would spend hours getting into details with clients with investments, not 20 years ago, like 1 year ago when he met with his clients. And now he's coming over. He says, oh my gosh, I see so many problems that I created by spending so much time wanting to analyze each stock, wanted to share all this information. And he got so giddy and so excited with it, but he was so getting into the weeds, he was losing that connection with the client. And that's the big thing right here. We got to understand that clients hired us for a reason, and they're delegating a lot of the stuff that they have to do onto us. That doesn't mean they want to do it with you.
Yeah, that's a great point. We have to remember anything we choose to talk about with a client or with a prospect, we're going to just use that interchangeably today, that's pushing out something else. And so if I sit down with a prospect or a client and say, you know what I want to do? I want to review the Morningstar reports together. That's pushing out discussions on goals, on estate planning, on risk management, on cash flow, on taxes, right? I'm saying that the Morningstar report is more important than anything else that we could talk about in that meeting. And when you say it that way, it seems absurd because it is absurd.
You know, Jarvis, I was just smiling because it's really funny because right before this podcast, you and I are talking, we were like, does Morningstar still do these reports? Like, I'm sure they do.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I'm sure somebody is cringing right now, not knowing that we don't know this, but that's just not an important factor in how we run assets under management and how we run clients' portfolios, etc. And this is one of those things that maybe you're a Morningstar nerd, and I mean that with all love, and you love jumping in there and you think that this adds alpha. This is what transforms your portfolios different. Okay, well then rock on. Just stick that in your playing office time when you're doing at work, and don't bring it up that much to clients in getting in those details with them.
Yeah, boys, you mentioned playing office as it relates to investments. This is a major drain playing office. It's probably, if I was just going to guess, because we don't believe in any industry studies because they're all made up. If I was going to guess, it would be email is the number one playing office. Number two is investments. And Micah, where we can immediately tell this, and you and I have done this with advisors constantly as we coach advisors, hey, tell us about your investment models. And an advisor will immediately lead with, well, it's what you don't understand, Micah and Jarvis, is that I run a custom portfolio for each client. You're laughing because you know this is true. I run a custom portfolio for each client. Really? So you didn't make any money last year, did you? Well, yeah, that's unrelated. That's a marketing issue. Wait. You built custom portfolios, which means I guarantee there's a 99% overlap. So really, you just picked like the most inefficient method possible to run these client accounts.
Right. And I mean, all of your clients, right? So, okay. And then you're going to top of that, you're going to say you're niche focused and all of your clients are doing the same thing, right? So it's okay. These are very much inconsistent thoughts.
Yes.
Now, our goal with investments is a tool. This is what I tell clients. Jarvis, I know you do the same. Look, it's a tool and it's designed to do a job, and its job is to help provide an income that you can never outlive. That's it. That's its job. And so we need to find out other things before we get to investments, right? I need to fill out my whole plans before I start picking out my tools that I'm going to use in order to do that. But again, I specialize in federal employees that are about to retire. Therefore, I have a very consistent mix on what these investments should be for almost all of my clients. Why? Because they're mostly all people about to retire or retired, and I need to generate a retirement income for them. Now, my clients that are younger, that are more growing towards financial independence, which is fantastic, we have different allocations for them,
for sure.
right? But I don't have custom models for every single one of our 550 households to think that, oh my gosh, like how is this all going to work? That is massively inefficient.
No, it totally is. Yes, you're going to have some differences in allocation, but almost entirely on cash flow. It's all goals based, right?
All goals
to your
based.
point, a younger client who's got no income needs, you're going to keep very minimal amounts in cash and bonds, not because it's some sort of efficient frontier, but they just don't need to have that drag on the portfolio. Conversely, someone who's retired or close to it that's taking systematic distributions, they need a bucket or a war chest of cash and bonds to cover those distributions and then other things that will come up. This isn't about what was your risk tolerance score or what's the efficient frontier or what's the spread between inflation adjusted treasury bonds and the yield on the S&P 500. It's about what investments, which tool will get us to our goals most reliably.
Now, one of the things that I tell clients very consistently, Jarvis, is I don't care what their risk score, what their emotional risk tolerance is. Yes. I care what they have to have in order to stay retired. Now, if we can't come together on that and what they have to have in order to retire, it makes them uncomfortable, maybe they're not a good fit to be a client. And maybe we need to have a graduation conversation, right? We can start some education, but it might move into graduation because I am not going to set, and I got this from Bill Backrack, right? Is you could set something up, but if you build a portfolio for someone's emotional risk tolerance that will not meet their retirement goals, then what the heck are you doing? Yeah. You're guaranteeing failure for them, and that's not okay. And that is the passion that I have working with clients as well, saying, hey, we got to build this up. We got to prepare for that 2008, but you got to prepare if you're going to live to 98, and how are we going to bridge that gap between these two?
Yeah, that's critical, Micah. And for me, I view that no differently than, yes, we're going to ask a client what kind of cash flow they want in retirement, though really we're just going to ask how much they're spending right now. But if a client says they want X and that's double what the portfolio is going to do, we're not going to say, well, sure, I guess we can do double what the portfolio can do because you said X, right? Your risk score was X. The same for this risk tolerance. Well, your risk score says you should be in 72% equities. I don't care. If that's not going to achieve the cash flow that we need across a multi-decade retirement, this is a non-starter for me.
So you just nailed it, right? I don't care. And it's not because I'm dispassionate, not because I don't want to do full financial planning, not because I don't want to have the client be able to sleep at night with their portfolio. It's we're solving for a bigger picture. I am not solving for emotions. And this is what I tell clients very directly of saying, hey, look, I am not building an emotional portfolio. I am building a portfolio that will last you your entire life. That's what I'm going for. Now, if there's something that we're doing that you lay your head on the pillow at night and you just can't sleep, well, great. Pick up the phone and give me a call. We need to reassess this. So we got to balance those two. But that's the reason I don't do these risk tolerances. I don't do these risk scores. And I'm not ragging on Riskalyze. I guess I am. They're a solid company. They've done a lot of really good things. They've really grown. That's there. But if you're, and I can see from a BD perspective why it's fantastic. So you can score it. And you could say, is an advisor doing something? Okay, great. You can see an advisor's doing something. Does it help the clients? I don't directly see that connection.
No, I don't. And to sort of tie this back around where we can take action, I always love whenever a client brings up performance or a prospective client brings up performance, I always love to use this great Nick Murray line, which is one of my favorites. And it's Mr. and Mrs. Klein. Imagine that we could beat the market by 2% every year. Every single year we beat the market by 2%. Now, by the way, that was Bernie Madoff's approach. So just let's set that aside just for a second. If we can beat the market by 2% every year and you run out of money at age 84, did we win?
Hey, that was Bernie Madoff's approach too.
That was literally his approach.
And ran out of money.
And you ran out of money, right? So if we beat the market, and so it's often trying to find ways, most of our job is finding ways to direct the client's attention to what matters. Our goal for retirees is to never run out of money. A secondary goal would be to not get killed in taxes, to not get killed by risk management things, to not lose everything in estate planning, et cetera. But these are what our goals are, and our job is to draw their focus back to this. And so when you have a prospect or a client who says, hey, I wonder what the Morningstar return is this thing, or the rating or the alpha or the whatever, it's because they've lost sight of what's important. And so they're grasping onto whatever they heard in the news or whatever else.
Jarvis, now I do have, so good fair disclosure, I do have one client, that really loves to get into the individual stock analysis. Now, we don't do it together. I won't do it for him, but every year he pulls all the stocks because we do run an individual stock portfolio as well as some ETFs, and he'll pull the stocks and he'll do a nice little review. And then once a year in our meetings, he'll bring up that review. He'll be like, hey, I really like when you bought this one. Here's the things I was doing. And he'll just like present it to me. And I'll be like, oh, fantastic.
Okay.
Any changes? Are we still good with this? He's like, yeah, you guys are doing a good job. I just really like to look at it. Great. I get zero qualms with that whatsoever because it's something he's excited about. But I'm not going to create this whole elaborate thing, and I'm not going to create a system that's really going to bore, confuse, and not help 99.9% of my clients.
Yeah, and especially for prospective clients, it's not going to help them make an educated and informed decision about your firm. Why? Well, because A, they don't really understand it, and no one does, just for the record. Nobody does. But then what you're saying is, hey, whatever past performance I was able to dig up, whatever cherry picking I was able to do is better than whatever cherry picking somebody else was able to do, right? That's what you're putting the value on. You're saying, hey, my value proposition is cherry picking. That's not much of a value proposition, right? And so that's where prospects then go back to, well, who did I like the most? Who was the nicest? Whose office smelt the best? Like whatever it is, whatever criteria they're going to fall back on. Whereas, Mike, when they come to your office, to my office, to any of our Invictus members' offices, right, and we say, hey, what's your plan for not overpaying the IRS? What's your plan for claiming Social Security? What's your plan for taking income out of your nest egg? Right? These are things that no one else is asking them, and we're widening the discussion to the things that really matter.
Right. So, Jarvis, let's kind of take that little piece of the pie and let's talk about how we communicate this with clients. And then maybe if we have some time, let's step into that back office role just a little bit and saying, okay, what are those things that we're doing? Because guess what? We're doing all the same things from the back office standpoint that has to be done. We're still being compliant. We're still doing asset allocation optimization. We're still doing all these other plannings. The biggest thing is, though, how do you make it streamlined and simple for the client, not only to understand in the meetings, but to understand in their statements when they start coming in from Schwab, Fidelity, etc.
Yeah, boy, let's pick a couple of those. One that I always go back to, I never talk about fixed income. Just let's use one example. Let's never talk about fixed income with a client, right? We talk about our war chest, or Mike, I know you call it the income bucket or the cash bucket, right? I want to articulate this in a way that they understand. So I say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, right? We want to make sure that we can take income every month, no matter what the market's doing. Good markets, bad markets, good presidents, bad presidents, inflation, low inflation, whatever it is. We want to be able to take this income every single month. So inside of your portfolio, we've set aside 5 years worth of income to cover these distributions, no matter what the market does. And then, Mike, we can go into, let's talk about a 5-year cycle, 2008, et cetera. But we want to articulate it in ways that translates to their goals, right? Fixed income does not translate to anything. A bucket of money where I can take monthly distributions, that translates into what I need. Excuse me.
Jared, so one thing I like to add to that is I like to talk, so that's the positive side. I also like to explain the negative side of this one as well. And it says, look, where do retirees get killed? Now, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you've done great the last 20, 30, 40 years. You've been building, you've been saving money in your 401k and your TSP. And market goes up, you buy. Market goes down, you buy. And it's all this over time. Over time, you really see your TSP, your 401k growing. But where retirees make a mistake is to say, hey, that worked out really well for me for this last 30 years. I'm going to keep doing it for the next 50 years, right? And everything should be fine. Everything should be the same. But the difference is instead of putting money in, you're pulling money out. And when you're pulling money out, another way of saying that is you're selling. Every month you're selling. Now the market falls and it goes down and down and down and you're selling. And for you listeners that can't see, I'm just lowering my hand as the market's going down. And just like in 2008. And that's how retirees get devastated, is they sell in down markets. Mr. and Mrs. Client, we have to have a plan. How do you get income even during a down market that does not devastate your portfolio?
Yeah, no, that's classic, right? Because you're drawing attention to things they haven't thought about before, right? They haven't thought about these things before, and no one's really talking about, sure, in obscure corners of whatever publication that may be being talked about, but no one's thinking about that. And as you pointed out, Mike, it's contrary to what they've done for the last couple of decades. And same thing. Hey, you spent your entire adult life saving money, and now we're going to stop saving and start spending. And it's really going to mess with your head, Mr. and Mrs. Client. In fact, what's going to happen is your caveman brain, right, the very back of your brain is going to scream at you, oh my goodness, you're going to run out of money and die, probably by a tiger. Now, we know that's not very likely that you're going to be eaten by a tiger, but that's what your brain is telling you. My goodness, my investments are going down. We will be out of food by the end of the week, et cetera. Our job is to make sure we have a plan to ride through those bear markets. Another one, Mike, I always tell clients with investing, I always say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I have to let you know, Murphy's law of investing is the day you retire, the markets will go down.
Yep.
and they'll go down a lot, and it will feel personal. And I promise you that it's not, but it will feel personal. Great news. We'll have a 5-year war chest set up so that even if it does go down that day, we have 5 years to ride that storm back out.
Now, these are really important stories that you need to have,
they are,
right?
yeah.
Because they're going to happen. And then let's say, worst case scenario is, let's say this does happen. They retire. The market does fall 20%. Because it does that normally. And now what is the client going to say? You know what, Matthew, you were correct. You told me the market would go down, and it did. I'm so glad we have this pot of money. Or let's say the market goes up. Well, great news. The market went up. You know what, Matthew, you were wrong right now, but I'm really glad we have this safety net because the market could have gone down. And I really like that peace of mind having that money set aside. So this is a great strategy for clients. And by the way, this fits in so beautifully, just articulated so poorly by so many, because your allocation's already going to have that. Almost no advisor I've ever met has a 100% equity allocation for a retiree that wants money. I haven't met any that do that. So assuming that everyone is in this camp that doesn't have 100% equities for retirees that want income, that means you have money in a cash reserve. You have money. Now, you could call them bonds. You could call it fixed income. I don't really care what you call it. You have money that's not in equities. Now we need to articulate that a little bit better and come up with a better distribution plan for our clients on how they're going to see that income.
Yeah, versus saying, hey, we have a 70-30 or a 60-40 or whatever. That really means nothing because not very many people can do percentages. Micah, back on that example of Murphy's Law, I have on multiple occasions had clients say, oh, Matthew, the markets went down just like you said they would. I have never, not once, 20-year career, had somebody say, Matthew, you said the markets were going to go down. And they went up when I retired. Never comes up, right? Because it's just forgotten about. But I have on many occasions. Yes. Oh, you know what, Matthew? Just like you told us, the markets went down when we transferred our assets. But I'm so glad we have this war chest. I'm glad we're working with you because before then I was worried about that. I didn't know what it meant. So yeah. The small things make a big difference.
Jarvis, the other story that I always like to tell when we're talking about transferring assets, right? So not starting so much income. I do the same thing starting income, but when we're transferring assets from the TSP, 401ks, whatever. I always give this example saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, that we're going to help you transfer your TSP. This is the process, how it's going to work. And I said, now here's what's going to happen. We're going to do all this paperwork. We're going to submit it to the TSP. They're going to accept it, and they're going to mail a check to Schwab in order to transfer money. Now, I can't blame the TSP. It's a little bit of an IRS thing. So they're going to mail a check out. Now, the problem is you're going to get notification that the money came out of your TSP account. And you're going to see that notification come through in a couple of days. And you're going to be like, I wonder. And you're going to log onto your TSP and you're going to see it's now down $1 million. $1 million has transferred out of your TSP account. So your heart's going to sink just a little bit, but you're going to be not a problem. We've already opened those Schwab accounts. Yeah. You're immediately going to go over to Schwab and you're going to open up your Schwab online access and your account balance is going to be, and they say $1 million. And I'm like, no, zero. It'll be zero and your heart's going to sink and you're going to grab that. You'll be like, why did I listen to that guy in Alaska? You're like, where is my money? Now, this is a normal process. It takes time for the check to get mailed from one place to the other and it deposited into your account. Great news is we're going to be tracking this alongside of you. We're going to let you know as soon as the money's at Schwab, we're going to get it deposited and we're going to talk about how it's going to be invested once it comes over. But this story is so important because had that not happened, and the reason I tell the story is because it did happen with a client. Not only did they call my office when they logged onto their account, it was zero. It was Friday, our office was closed. They called back on Monday, and I was out for 2 weeks in Hawaii or someplace. And that's what my front desk said. Mike is gone in Hawaii. And all this client was like, he took my money and left to Hawaii, right? Now, still a great client today, et cetera. And, we finally got on the phone. They're like, I know this is just emotional, but I need to talk to you and I need to make sure it's here. And the reason they needed to chat, Jarvis, as you've already picked up on, I failed to do my job in communicating what this process was going to be. Now, that could be the same on an asset transfer. That's the same on investment allocations as well. You have a job of communicating the expectations on what should take place.
Yeah, this is two big reminders stand out here for me, Micah. One is you've got to make sure your team understands this same story, right? They need to understand that this is going to happen and that the prospect or client is likely going to call with this question. And when they do, they need to be ready. That's probably why they're calling, right? If they call during that process and they're frantic or they're nervous or whatever, that's probably why, right? Anytime money is in motion, we need to have extra white gloves on to help facilitate that one. The other one that comes up, Micah, is if you have clients or prospects that are bringing up any kind of investment concern, performance, fees, socially responsible investing, past performance, Morningstar ratings, why your Roth account did better than your IRA account, any of those things, that is where you need to take extreme ownership, in the words of Jocko, and say, wait, I failed to educate the client. It's not because they're dummies. It's not because they just don't get it. These are things I hear advisors say, oh, they just don't get it. They're just not very sophisticated. No, you failed to educate them. You failed to educate them, and you failed to educate them again and again and again and again. These discussions happen in every single meeting because it's that critical, right? We have to remember, and Brian Westbury, who always talked about this at First Trust, he says, I want to be the inoculation, the anecdote to conventional wisdom, right? We have to be the anecdote or the antidote to what our clients are being bombarded with on a daily basis when it comes to investing, right? They're getting bombarded with all the wrong messages 24/7. We are the one voice of reason.
Yeah, I mean, all of the messaging, all the marketing that's spent out is about trade, right? It's about, all of these other things. There's two extremes. There's the buy and hold and never make a change, or day trading, not too much in the middle, because that's where people are making money. That's where the big money is, because they make the money on the trading. And so one of the things that we got to be this focus, this core of reason for our clients coming in is saying, hey, those are great ideas, and there's something that some people could benefit. Let me talk about how this works for you in your retirement. Jarvis, I always want to come back to my client and their goals. Great news. You want to have $6,000 a month coming out of this investment account. Here's the best way to do this. Hey, Mike, I heard of my friends doing blah, blah, blah. Well, that could be a great strategy for your friend. I don't know what's going on, but I know with you want to pull out $6,000 a month out of your accounts. Let's talk about the best way to make that happen in good markets and bad markets. I'm always going back to what their goals are. And I encourage my clients to push back on me and say, hey, if I ever give you a recommendation and you do not see how that is directly tied to your goals, you need to push back on me right away. And to say, hey, how does this meet my goals? Let's keep me on my toes. Every recommendation I give you should directly align with your goals. And if they don't, that's a red flag.
Mike, we talked about in this episode several kind of stories or little anecdotes to tell people. One that I like to use quite frequently when somebody brings up making changes or they read something in whatever news. I say, hey, Mr. Mrs. Klein, did you know that every day when the stock market closes, the traders cheer? They cheer at the end of each day. I didn't know that. No, they do. At the end of each day, it's tradition. They cheer whether the market has gone up or whether it's gone down. Why? Why do they cheer? Because Wall Street makes money no matter what. Every time we place a trade, Wall Street makes money on that trade. Every single time, without exception. There's never a trade that's ever been placed that Wall Street didn't make money. Now, again, for our technical listeners, they might say, well, Fidelity trades in dark pools, whatever. Somebody's making money, and it's not the client every time a trade is made. So Mr. and Mrs. Client, one of the things we try to do is reduce the number of trades that are going on inside your account. Now, most firms don't do this. Most firms, they make trades to look busy because they like to look busy. We don't like to look busy. We like to do what works. Now, most financial magazines also want you to be busy because who pays for those magazines? Well, thumb through them. They're being paid for by the investment companies, by Wall Street. And so those people want you to make as many trades as you possibly can. Why? So they can make as much money as they possibly can. We want you to make as few trades as we reasonably can so that you can keep the most money as possible. And so, Micah, it's stories like those that help the client understand, wait a second, I never thought that the reason that every single episode of Money Magazine has the 10 funds you should buy today is because those funds are all paying to be in the magazine.
Right.
They never thought about that. They thought like this is some altruistic service, right? That was just for information purposes.
I love it. Well, Jarvis, this podcast is all about action items. And I know I'm going to save kind of our best one, kind of our number one maybe for last to make sure our listeners really hear it. But I'm going to say one of the things that you have to do is I want you to take a pause in your meetings and I want you to look at it and see how much investments come up. If it comes up for more than 5 minutes in a 1 hour discussion, I'm going to say you're doing it wrong. Your focus is not on financial planning, it's on investing. Now, maybe you're a day trader, and maybe that's just all you do, and you're not a financial planner, you're just a stock jock. Well, then rock on. Yeah. Maybe it should take up more minutes. I have no idea. That's not what I do. But if you're a financial planner, then I'm going to say investments for more than 5 minutes is, if on a routine meeting, right, on a normal client check-in is a little too much. On maybe an asset transfer meeting, I'm okay going to like 15 minutes. That would kind of be on the high side of reasonable on what it would take in order to transfer. And we're not trying to limit this time to hide information from the client. We're being very transparent on what's happening. We're being very direct. The biggest thing is, though, we're not getting into the details and the weeds. We're very much connecting. Why are you hiring us? How does this meet your goals? And what are the signs we need to do moving forward to grade it? Is it working? Is it not?
Mike, I would say a second action item, and we didn't talk about this much in the episode, but it is critical, is that you have to systematize your asset management. You have to systematize your Roth conversions. You have to systematize your rebalancing, how much cash you maintain. This actually came up on a team call the other day that I had with our team, and they said, oh, well, so-and-so has X amount of cash. How much cash should be in there? I don't know. Let's pull up our investment policy. How much cash do we keep in client accounts that are taking withdrawals? Oh, it says between this and this. In fact, that's what the software says as well. We're not going to make these one-off decisions. Are there times for one-off decisions? Sure, but they're really not even that one-off, right? A client says, hey, I'm going to need $100,000 in 6 months to cover this. Cool. Well, that's the same as everybody who needs 100,000 in 6 months. Here's how we handle that. So streamline that as much as you possibly can.
Now, one of the ways to check if it's streamlined is your team should be able to answer these questions for you. If you not give advice to clients, that's not what I said. If a client calls in and says, hey, I need X amount of money, and it's outside of our systematic withdrawals that we have set up for them, my team has a checklist of things that they need to follow in order to make sure that they can just, approve that, or if it needs to go to my list. Now, sometimes the team, it'll be a larger dollar amount, still be within the percentages, but a larger dollar amount outside my team's threshold. And so they'll come to me and I'll be like, okay, great. Show me the process you followed. These are the questions that I answered. Great. Meets all the rules, right? I don't need to know exactly what client it is. It meets all the rules on the distributions. We're good to be sending that money out.
Yeah, unless it exceeds that dollar threshold. Or I'm just trying to think, the only other case where I've seen this come up is if a client transfers over some highly appreciated assets in a non-qualified account. Those are pretty much the only circumstances that are going to come to me on a one-off basis. Everything else is going to be streamlined. It's going to be consistent across every client. Micah, last action item on my list, and this came up for me actually literally this week. I travel quite a bit because I love to travel, and I made some last-minute changes to my travel itinerary, which that's an ADD thing on my part. But what I was able to do was call Zach, my executive assistant from Belay, and say, hey, Zach, I changed my mind. I'm not leaving for Portland today. I'm going to leave tomorrow. I want to go this other time. Please make that happen. Zach says, great, I'll get on top of that, goes on, changes my flights, updates TripIt, updates all my things. Now, could I have done that myself? Yeah, I definitely know how to change flights. I do a lot of those flights. But the time it saved me allowed me to have that extra time with my family, with my friends, to focus on the things that are most important, right? I can spend that time on this podcast instead of screwing around on the Alaska Airlines website. So if you have an executive assistant, or if you're looking for one, either way, text the letters RIA to 55123 to get Belay's ebook on how to best work with your executive assistant. Micah, you and I have both had executive assistants for years and years and years and years. And it's really an item that next levels your, not just your practice, but your life in general.
I love it. Jarvis, as always, these are a blast. Make sure you take advantage of an executive assistant. Belay somebody else, right? That's just your call. But you need to have someone in your corner in order to help push you to the next level. And until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.